Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Raymond Peterson.
I'm Alan Singer.
And we're happy to have another guest with us for this session of Media Watch. Longtime friend and colleague and pioneering Anchorwoman, Melba Tolliver. Melba Tolliver, welcome to Media Watch.
Thank you all. I'm delighted and really thrilled to be here. Thank you so much.
I'm really glad you're doing this with us because we're here doing a post-mortem the day after the 2024 presidential election. And we're doing this, Wednesday, November 6th. And hopefully it'll air next Monday on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. It'll show up on our YouTube channel, Media Watch EVT, probably on LinkedIn, and maybe next Monday at Manhattan Neighborhood Network, right? We hope. Fingers crossed. And we'll let folks know. Being brought to you by EVT Educational Productions, Zooms, and when it airs on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. How do we want to jump into this post-mortem? Folks, by now, when the show airs, will know that Kamala Harris lost the presidential election. Okay. And we all know to whom she lost, but the 34 convicted felon is now going to be back in the White House again, folks. So, Alan is a historian. Put this in perspective really quickly before we start doing postmortems on how it might have happened and what our personal perspectives and feelings are about the outcome.
Well, the New York Times will have an interesting article in the Thursday paper, and they're discussing they're arguing that Kamala argued, well, we're not like that, and what the Times is saying, well, maybe we are like that. And there is a long history of racism, authoritarianism in the United States. This is not a new phenomenon, Trumpism. It's just, I think this is the first time Trumpism has succeeded in capturing the White House, and it looks like it will capture all the branches of the United States government. For me, that's a failure of the Constitution. Constitution was designed to have checks and balances, different branches. Well, now it looks like the Republicans will definitely control the White House, will definitely control the Senate, will definitely control the Supreme Court, and may well control the House of Representatives. I am really terrified there'll be no break on Trumpism. There was an interesting article also in The Atlantic, and Tom Nicholson wrote, Trump victory is a grim day for the United States and for democracy around the world. But he said Americans who care about democracy have a lot of work to do. I'm an American who cares about democracy, equality, decency. I was outraged by the election. I think the situation was much worse than I thought it would be. I thought Kamala ran a really good campaign, but clearly the misogyny, the nativism, the racism, the gender bias, and xenophobia, the grievance and anger that Donald Trump represented, we now have to accept has very deep roots in the United States.
Well, it's interesting because, a lot of people are wringing their hands and saying, woe is me. And I'm not going to say they don't have good cause because I'm feeling similarly. But there was another comment. There's a publication called The Hill, which we've, looked into at times because it's kind of like based in Washington, D.C. It does a lot of stuff on politics and Congress and what's going on. And from my way of thinking, and I've looked at it over the years, they tend to skew more center right than center or center left. But they had an interesting opinion piece by a gentleman by the name of Max Burns, and it was an opinion piece. And I checked up on who he was because his name was not familiar to me, even though I do a lot of reading on politics and political stuff. But it turns out he's I believe, a Democratic, specialist or pollster or advisor consultant. And his take, for me, encapsulated basically my personal feeling. I was so surprised how well he went. We've now hit the realization that democracy's worst case scenario is now unfolding in real time as a result of the re-election of Donald Trump. And he went on to say, a man with 34 felony convictions can't win the presidency in a nation where trust in institution is high. It's only in a culture where the justice system has long since lost its legitimacy that a man with such a thick criminal record as Trump glides by relatively unremarked. That one man can so effortlessly game American institutions to his own benefit says as much about the decrepit state of America's institutions as it does about the moral decrepitude of the crook. I haven't seen that word decrepitude in a while. I almost stumbled over it. But that was his assessment of the fact that, one, Trump not only got to the top of the, quote, Republican Party, unquote, a second time, but actually was reelected to the office of the presidency. Now, I don't know, Melba, you've been in this game for a long time. What your take on as somebody who's done this for longer than I have, give us a little bit of your take on who this guy is or where we are as a country.
Well, I think a couple of things, and I use the word think advisedly, because long ago I realized that thinking is not always what happens when I'm using the word. I may be just resorting to an old habit, but not doing any real thinking. So, number one, I was very moved just before signing on with you all that a white neighbor across the road from me here in Bangor, PA, rushed to my door, and she was in a state of panic. I thought something had happened to someone in her family because her husband has been in ill health. And I opened the door, and she said, Melba, Melba. And she just could not believe that Trump had won. She just couldn't believe it. And even in my state, I couldn't believe it either. But her panic was so heartbreaking. I just didn't know what to do to try to comfort her other than to just put my arms around her and ask her to come in and have a seat. That's number one. So I know that whatever is going on is not all racial. It's not all about this person does this, doesn't have a college education or does have a college education. It's not about whether these people are working class or not working class. But as was said earlier, we are witnessing something that is deep, deep rooted. I have never claimed to be an investigative reporter or a political reporter. My only specialty has been bringing some light on what I call everyday ordinary folks. This woman is an everyday ordinary person, and the depth of her despair was so moving that it gives me hope. Although I use the word again, hope, lightly. My mother used to say, if hope and wishes came true, then bandits would ride. If hope and wishes were horses, beggars would ride. So it's like hope and wishes is just not enough. The sweep of number 45's victory is what is mind-blowing. That he took all 7 so-called swing states, including the one I'm in now, and he had something, he had 71 million point 8 voters cast a vote for him, compared to Harris's 66,000,
66 million.
close to 67,000.
Million.
I mean, I'm sorry, 67 million, yes. Says something that needs to be really acknowledged. This is
Yeah,
not.
Yeah, Raymond, go ahead.
Yeah, no, Melba, he ran on a campaign of fear, extreme fear, with his rhetoric, his racism, his misogyny, and just his bluster about how he's here's the problem. I'm scaring you to death, and I'm the only one that can take away the fear because I'm the only one that can right the situation of the terrible America. Meanwhile, mainstream press did not go after him. They didn't call him. They reported what was going on, but we never went after him. Do you feel that mainstream American media did its job over the past?
What I would say with plenty of evidence is that the polls and the press did a horrible job. What I would also say is what you've just said, Ray. What you have said is what has been publicly known. It's not like we're not going to say anything new here about the who number 45 is. Nothing we say is going to be news. It's not breaking news. He said all of this himself over and over and over and over and over. We know the Republicans and the stature of the people who warned us, do not put this man back in the Oval Office. So none of this is news. What's news, in my opinion, is the breadth and the depth of what we are witnessing.
How the votes came out. Alan, you say you've got some stuff. Let me run some numbers and you can cross-check me if I'm wrong, okay? Because I scoured I went online to see what those exit polls were saying, because leading into the election, they say, okay, if she loses, it's going to be the fault of Black men. And then I've had conversations with people who said, hey, look, the only way she's going to win is if white women stop voting for Donald Trump. And then it was, oh, if the young people come out. Well, the exit polls that I saw that summed stuff up, and Alan, you might be able to dig even deeper and break it down, but the Griot summarized stuff that came from the Washington Post and Politico. And according to the Washington Post, their exit poll said the majority of the white votes, 55%, just talk all white, majority of the white votes, 55%, voted for Donald Trump. They don't care whether you were college educated, don't care where, they didn't break it down into that. They just lumped white votes, 55%. And then they broke it down by gender. 59% of white men voted for Trump and 52% of white women followed.
Women.
So therefore, exactly what happened with Hillary Clinton happened with Kamala Harris, also happened with Joe Biden. White women voted for Trump, but Joe Biden managed to squeak that one out. When Trump won, they voted for him then. So the people who are saying if white women wants to save the democracy, they can. But if they don't, they won't. And the bottom line is they evidently didn't want to based on those exit polls. Alan, what have you seen in your scouring the exit polls?
I think you touched on the main things. One of the other things they looked at is the age brackets, and younger voters tended to be more supportive of Kamala, but you still had 45% who supported Trump.
Mm.
The other things that struck me among Hispanic or Latino voters, it was 53% for Kamala, 45% for Trump. And among Asian voters, it was 56% for Kamala, 38% for Trump. So while African Americans overwhelmingly voted for Kamala, 86-12, and even Black men, who everybody was worried they're going to vote for Trump, did not.
Well,
Other non-whites that had been in the Democratic coalition have shifted. And that concerns me about the future. I'm not sure why. 78% of Black men voted for Kamala. The other thing that struck me, and Melba made a very important point, Trump got 72 million votes to 67 million for Kamala. Well, in 2020, Biden got 81 million votes to 74 million votes for Trump, which means Trump actually got fewer votes this time than he did in 2020.
Correct.
The problem was that the Democrats, who made a big effort to turn out the vote, were unable to. There were too many alienated voters who couldn't stomach Trump, but they weren't going to vote Democratic this time.
Mm.
Okay,
That's the thing that struck me the most.
So Biden's negative numbers, whether it was the economy or whatever was going on in Gaza, could have well been part of the problem. But to go back to those voters of color,
yeah,
I need to double check numbers because according to what I read about the Washington Post, 45% of Latinos voted for Trump. Is that close to what you have?
Yes, I have 45, exactly.
45 voted for Trump, but 54% of Latino men went for Trump, which is a lot larger. And unfortunately, there were 20% of Black men, which is double what it was in 2020, voted for Trump. So whatever Kool-Aid they were drinking, I have no idea what that was. But Melba, you're correct. This seems to bode not well for the state of this country, that this guy seems to be, he may be getting less total numbers as he did 4 years ago, but he's getting more percentage of the total electorate based on these numbers that we're looking at, unless I'm misinterpreting these numbers. He got more women.
No, you're right.
He got more Black men. He got pretty much the same white women. He definitely got more white young males. So if we're worried about the state of the country, worrying about autocracy, evidently there aren't too many people worrying about autocracy because this guy's getting more support. Or am I wrong?
Well, there was another interesting point they made. They looked at religion. 41% of Catholics voted for Kamala, 56% for Trump. 37% of Protestants voted for Kamala, 62% for Trump. 79% of Jews voted for Kamala. And that was at a time when there was tremendous concern about the Biden administration's actions related to Israel. Jews remained the most loyal group to the Democratic Party.
Except for Black women.
And Black, you're right, 92%.
92% of Black women.
Right, 92% of Black women and American Jews were the most loyal Kamala voters.
So
Well,
go ahead, Melba.
Well, I want to just throw in a caution here. This categorization of folks is problematic. Someone can be young and Black and college educated or not college educated. And so some of these categories don't make any sense because they overlap, and they're really not telling us much of anything. It's like using the term women and minorities. Well,
Yeah.
minorities includes women, men, children. Women was deliberately added to the Civil Rights Act to cover white women. Otherwise, what that phrase really means is everybody except white men.
Mm.
Yeah, actually, when you parse it out, that's exactly what it means, because women and minorities exclude minority, quote, minority women from the women category because you've just lumped them all into the minority category.
And in my book, which I'm not trying to peddle at all, but I quote Frank Bruni back in whenever it was, when Kamala, Elizabeth Warren, and Klobuchar were three women, only and then you had uh Julian Castro and Booker, and Bruni emphatically included Kamala Harris as one of the people of color. She did not occupy two boxes. This is why just knowing exactly what are we talking about and who is making these categories. He said there were 5 candidates who were not the usual candidates. 2 women, Klobuchar and Warren, and 3 people of color, Harris, Castro, and Booker.
Mm.
Now he picked which box to put Harris in. So he didn't allow her to occupy 2 boxes. And we people, consumers of news, accept this nonsense, what Neil Postman calls stupid talk, crazy talk, as if it's gospel. Instead of saying, look, I learned this stuff in my kitchen table. 2 and 3 is 5. 3 and 3 is 6 if you count Harris twice. So some of this mischief and failure to communicate is due to practices of the news media and the failure of news consumers to question things that do not add up or make sense.
Yeah.
Based on what you're saying, let me circle back, because forget all the breakdowns, college age, whatever. If you just break it down by the exit polls for where did the white folks vote? And then where did all the rest of the people vote? If you got Trump getting 55% of the white vote, was it 55 and 52 for women and 55 for men? When they broke that down, that meant the rest of the voters were not white men or white women. They were people of color. And the total didn't add up to the same amount of votes that Donald Trump got, whether it was 66,000 for her. And am I doing this math correctly? 71 million for him, and 66 million for her. But according to the Washington Post numbers, the total white vote that went for Trump was like, let me actually not pull it out of here. Let me actually get the exact number.
And Eric, while you're doing that, we have a little over 3 minutes to go. Time flies. I know we wanted to carry.
Yeah, 55% voted for Donald Trump.
Eric, can I add something?
Go ahead.
This morning, I got phone calls from former students who are now teachers.
Mm-hmm.
One of the calls, he was Puerto Rican, and the other call, she's African American. And they were interesting calls, but they both asked me, they were both very distressed, and they said, Alan, what do we tell our our students, what do we tell our children? And I said, look, it's a hard, I said, I'm telling my students, we're going to wait a couple of days to let the things settle so we could examine it. But our children, I said, look, there were 70 million people who voted for Kamala, who agree with our vision for the future. And we have to tell our children that we're disappointed in the outcome, but there are a lot of people who are allied with us. And that means we have to continue to struggle and we have to continue to work to make it a better country.
Excellent, Alan, because I'm currently reading Melba's book right now. And the name of the book, folks, is Melba Tolliver, Accidental Anchorwoman. And the fact that I'm reading this book about this time makes it all the more poignant, because this book reminded me of how many times in the 20th century and coming out of whatever, that people in this country that have been struggling to make this country live up to its aspirational things have gotten shot down, have gotten executed. And we could run a list of names in the 60s, and we could run a list of bad things that happened. But as a people, Black people in this country worked their way out of slavery, sometimes with help of others, and survived bloody summers of 1919, the bloody summers of 1960s, and lived to fight another day. So I'm saying we got to buckle up, buckle down, and organize, organize, organize. Make sure you try to control your local level elections. Melba?
Let's get a minute.
Amen. Amen, Eric.
Amen, Eric.
Yeah.
Raymond, tag us out.
Okay. This has
So-
been Media Watch.
No, I want you to
What do you
give
want
your
to say?
explanation before we run out of time.
I'm sorry.
Your feelings on this?
Oh, my feelings on this? I'm not surprised that he got reelected. I've talked to people who have never been registered because they don't care about the society. They said, government's never done anything for me. It's not going to affect me one way or the other.
Okay, all right. Well, folks, this has been Media Watch. Thanks for joining us. I'm Eric Tait.
I'm Raymond Peterson.
I'm Alan Singer.
And our host, guests, forgive me, our wonderful guest, Melba.
Melba Tolliver.
Melba
Melba
Tolliver.
Tolliver. And we're out of time.